Sign the non-compete or you're out, Troy said, like he was offering me a dinner mint instead of a corporate guillotine. HR's fluorescent lights buzzed above us, and I swear the air vent let out a groan, like even the building couldn't stomach his smug little power play. His pen was already uncapped. The document had a sticky note on it, Jennifer, time sensitive. The words blurred a little because my blood pressure had hit boil pasta without water levels. I just finished leading the final client demo for our forecasting engine, a product I had architected from scratch, named, refined, pitched, and walked through regulatory hell to get greenlit. 8 years. 8 years of skipped birthdays, back-to-back 14-hour days, and a borderline romantic relationship with Excel. All building up to next week, when my 5-year equity cliff would finally vest. Little vesting timer I'd watched tick down for 1,800 days. And now Troy, a man whose main skill set seemed to be weaponizing LinkedIn buzzwords, was trying to scare me into signing away my entire future in exchange for, what exactly? Continued abuse. 2 years, I asked, flipping to the clause like maybe I'd hallucinated it. Statewide, no severance. Troy, this isn't a non-compete. It's a non-life, he grinned, aligning expectations at the leadership level. No, Troy, you're aligning your resume so you can take credit for my engine and kneecap me before I become more expensive. By the way, if you're already hooked, tap that subscribe button and hit like. It keeps these stories coming, and trust me, this one only gets darker. I closed the folder and looked him dead in the eye. No, you'll be escorted out by 11. It was 9:17. Didn't even give me time to clear out my Outlook calendar. My badge beeped red at the elevator. Security gave me a cardboard box like I'd won the world's worst raffle prize. On my way out, I passed the glass meeting room where Troy was already laughing with legal counsel. We're just cleaning house, he said, as if firing the woman who built the house was just good spring cleaning. I had a manila envelope with a charger cord, my desk cactus, a USB stick I kept for personal files, random templates, birthday invites, some source code snapshots for my portfolio. Technically nothing proprietary, but enough to prove the truth if ever needed. At the time, it felt like a souvenir from a funeral. When I got home, my Nextseller laptop locked itself mid-email draft. I opened my personal Dropbox. Empty. They'd scrubbed it. Not just access revoked, actual deletions. Even pictures of our team offsite in Tahoe. Even the stupid meme I'd made of Troy's Synergy roadmap chart, looking like a toddler's crayon accident. All gone. That night, I lay on my couch staring at the ceiling fan, letting it spin like the wheels in my head, trying to process how 8 years of loyalty could be shredded in one meeting. The walls of my apartment felt unfamiliar, like I didn't live there, just hid there after getting kicked out of a life I'd built with surgical precision. And still, I didn't cry. Not yet. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't always hit you like a car crash. Sometimes it's a slow bleed. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, it's the start of something much more satisfying. Something cold, something methodical. Something that makes even the smug bastards in designer shoes realize. Maybe they shouldn't have underestimated the quiet one, 'cause here's the part Troy never understood. You don't bury a woman like me, you plant her, and she grows back with knives. The badge scanner blinked red like it was judging me, like it knew. By the time I reached the elevator, I was officially a ghost in my own office, locked out, blacklisted, erased with the efficiency of a corporate crime scene cleanup. I stood there in my navy blazer, holding a box of office trinkets and watching the digital display count down from 28. The silence in the elevator lobby was the kind that makes your ears ring. Then I heard it. Through the glass, muffled but clear, Troy's voice laughing with legal. House cleaning always makes a mess, he chuckled. At least the Roomba's out. The Roomba. That's what I was to him. 8 years of service, innovation, leadership, and I was a glorified vacuum with an off switch. He just happily pressed. When the elevator doors opened, I walked in, and something inside me, some last scrap of Midwestern politeness, died. I didn't look back. The Uber ride home felt like purgatory. The driver tried to make small talk. I stared out the window like I was watching the wreckage of my career play out in real time. By the time I stepped into my apartment, I wasn't even angry. I was something worse, blank, like someone had put my emotions through a paper shredder and then threw the bag away. I powered on my personal laptop. First stop, my Nextseller email. I wanted to send a goodbye note, something dignified, adult, restrained. Maybe with a quote from Maya Angelou if I could stomach it. Blocked, tried again. still blocked. I logged into my cloud drive where I'd kept copies of photos, team documents, non-sensitive design notes, even a congratulations from the CTO when my engine prototype hit 96% accuracy. Empty. They didn't just remove access. They scrubbed me, like I'd never existed, like my name had been a dry erase smudge on a whiteboard they'd finally wiped clean. I sat there, frozen in my desk chair, staring at the spinning icon of a deleted file folder, wondering how many hours of my life now existed only in someone else's server log. Then, on impulse, I reached for the USB stick I'd pocketed from my drawer before leaving, plugged it in. There they were, snapshots of raw source code, early models, my original UI drafts, and an email thread from 6 months ago where Troy praised my system's performance in all caps like a frat boy discovering crypto. This engine prints money. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet. I wasn't thinking revenge. I wasn't thinking anything. I was just cataloging. That's what survivors do. We document. I cracked open a beer, sat on the couch in my blazer like some kind of deranged, jobless executive, and turned on the news. They were covering some celebrity trial, a senator's affair, a gas price hike. Real disasters, not mine. My phone buzzed, message from Serena, my old colleague in QA. He really did it. Holy SHT, want to talk? I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't ready for sympathy or pep talks or job board links with little apply now buttons blinking like hope in a straitjacket. All I wanted was silence, and maybe a plan. At 3 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and started writing down everything I remembered from the last 12 months. Dates, meetings, performance reviews, Troy's weird vision talks. The pivot when he started attending my strategy sessions and calling them his. I labeled it the takedown log, not because I thought I'd ever use it, but because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that I was there, that I mattered. The rage was starting to bubble now, slow and steady, but I buried it under a blanket of logistics, timelines, and folder names. That's how numb survival works. You don't cry, you organize. Because somewhere inside I knew, if Troy thought I was going quietly, he'd severely miscalculated. I wasn't done, not by a damn long shot. They don't tell you how quiet life gets after corporate exile. No Slack pings, no status meetings, no Tuesday bagels, just a buzzing fridge and a cat who's starting to look concerned about your hygiene. By week 2, I had applied to 17 jobs. By week 4, I'd heard back from 3. All said the same thing: we loved your portfolio, but due to your previous non-compete, legal has advised against proceeding at this time. Translation: Troy had poisoned the well. It wasn't just the contract. It was the whisper campaign. Recruiters loved him. He was young, tall, gel-haired, and full of charming half-truths. LinkedIn darling. Said all the right things like product-market synergy and agile verticals. Meanwhile, I had a spotless track record, a master's degree, and an award-winning engine, but no job, no severance, and no legal footing. I did what every desperate person with a laptop and pride does. I created a fake LLC, Ross and Beacon Analytics. Sounded vaguely coastal, vaguely real. I took contract gigs off remote job boards under the alias J. Ross, kept my camera off, and undercharged by 40% just to avoid suspicion. I rewrote pitch decks for fintech bros in Salt Lake, debugged broken Python scripts for startups that paid in crypto, consulted on a logistics model for a meat subscription box company that kept asking if I could add more sizzle. My bank account drained like a leaking faucet. Rent was still due, so was karma. And then, one night in June, I made the mistake of Googling Nextseller Forecast Engine. I hadn't looked, hadn't wanted to. There it was, on the front page of Tech Signal Weekly. A glowing interview with Troy Renshaw, now VP of Innovation, discussing how his revolutionary system had redefined predictive enterprise architecture. My code, my logic model. Even the UI wireframe had the same damn color palette I fought to keep when marketing wanted something more vibrant. He was grinning in the photo, arm draped casually over the chair like he'd just discovered fire and wanted to trademark it. The article quoted him saying, "We believe in nurturing internal talent." His engine was the result of deep cross-functional collaboration. I threw my wine glass. It missed the wall, bounced off a pile of laundry, and shattered on the hardwood. The cat bolted. I didn't move. I sat in the mess, cheeks flushed, legs folded like a doll someone forgot to pose right. I opened my laptop, typed Department of Labor Retaliatory Termination Complaint into the search bar, and found the form in seconds. Bookmark. I stared at the submit button for a full minute. Didn't click. Not because I wasn't ready to fight, but because that wasn't the fight I wanted. I didn't want pity. I didn't want a 6-month arbitration process and a $5 Starbucks gift card as an apology. I wanted strategy. I wanted surgical. I wanted him to feel what it was like to have everything crumble under your feet while the world watched and no one stepped in. I wanted him to know exactly whose name he erased. So I closed the tab, opened a spreadsheet, named it Phase 1. Then I poured another glass of wine and started listing every person I knew who still worked at Nextseller, every partner, every client. And one name jumped out, Klein and Danner Logistics Group, our biggest enterprise partner, the one who'd signed a 7-figure deal based on my forecasting module, the one whose CTO I'd personally onboarded, one who told me, if this system does what you say, Jennifer, you're going to change our entire supply chain. I hadn't emailed them in over a year, but I still had the CTO's direct line. And I had an idea, not revenge, not yet, just recalibration. Strategic alignment, the kind that makes smirking men very, very nervous. It came in the middle of a Thursday afternoon, just as I was rewriting a broken regression model for a DTC mattress startup that thought machine learning meant renaming tabs in Excel. My inbox chimed with a message from Serena. Bless her stubborn loyalty. Subject: thought of you when I saw this. The link was to an article buried deep in the Midwest Labor Law Review. A site so dry it made C-SPAN look like a Marvel movie. The headline snapped my spine straight. State Assembly passes SB 83B, sweeping reform to non-compete enforcement. I clicked. And read, then reread, then printed the damn thing out and sat cross-legged on the floor with a yellow highlighter like I was cramming for the LSAT. The new statute wasn't splashy, no press release, no Twitter buzz, but it was seismic. For the first time, our state had set clear restrictions on the enforcement of non-competes for high-skilled, non-executive laborers, retroactively. And there, in the third subsection of a transitional clause, was the language that made my pulse skip. Termination deemed retaliatory and absent due cause shall render any associated non-compete null and unenforceable if conditioned as a term of continued employment post-January 1. That was my case, word for word. I was terminated after refusing to sign a non-compete. No cause, just Troy playing house with HR and thinking director meant disposable. I didn't dare get excited. Not yet, but the hope, it flickered, like the fridge light during a power surge, weak but alive. I called every employment lawyer I could find. Most were too busy. One quoted me $350 an hour just to read my file. Then, somewhere in the dark corners of a Reddit thread about illegal NDAs, found a link to an organization called the Workers' Equity Legal Initiative, WELI for short. Pro bono, civil labor law, run by tired idealists and pissed-off law students with too much coffee and not enough sleep. I filled out the intake form, attached every scrap of evidence I had, emails, screenshots, a copy of the original termination letter with that infamous line. We are restructuring leadership to better reflect organizational synergy. Called me the next morning. Miss Ross, a voice said, groggy but sharp. I'm Sarah Patel, second year at Wendell Law working under Mr. Kim. We reviewed your materials. A pause. You might have something here, something big. I didn't speak right away. My hands were shaking, fingers hovering over the keyboard like it might explode. Sarah continued, rattling off legal jargon I barely followed, but I clung to the key phrases. Retaliatory termination, post-effective non-compete. Subsection G might be your silver bullet. She told me not to make any noise, not yet. Just keep collecting, keep working, keep my head down. We scheduled a meeting to go over my strategy. She said, let Troy file first. Let him get bold, that's when we strike. I hung up, sat back in my chair, and stared at the wall like it owed me answers. I had a statute now, a team, teeth, and just in time too, because word around the industry was that Nextseller's forecast engine was underperforming. Badly. Their biggest client, Klein and Danner, had missed their Q2 benchmarks and were publicly blaming predictive inconsistencies. I knew exactly what that meant. Troy had my engine, but he didn't understand it. He used it like a child with a loaded gun, impressive at first, until things go bang. So I picked up my phone, texted the K&D CTO, hey, long time. Hope all's well. I might have some insight on your forecast issues. Free to chat? It was 2:03 p.m. He responded at 2:04. Please, today, urgent. And just like that, the shift began. Not a comeback, an infiltration. Quiet, surgical. Legal teeth filed to a razor's edge. If Troy thought this was over, he hadn't been paying attention. But I had, to every clause, every contract, every smug little smirk that would one day curl under the weight of real consequences. I called it Beacon Analytics, because nothing says nothing to see here like a name ripped from a PowerPoint template. Set up the LLC in Delaware, registered a clean domain, paid a guy on $5 or $70 to design a minimalist logo with a pretend mission statement, illuminating clarity through data. I didn't need investors. I didn't need a splashy launch. I just needed the right client, and I got him. Klein and Danner Logistics Group. Their CTO, Aaron Barlow, remembered me instantly. We jumped on a Zoom the same day I texted. He didn't even try to hide the frustration in his voice. Troy's team promised a version 3.0, he said, rubbing his forehead like it owed him money. All we've gotten is lag, buggy overlays, and data inconsistencies. Honestly, the projections are so off. Double booking container routes and burning vendor contracts. I listened, took notes, nodded like a consultant, even though what I really wanted to do was scream "I told you so" into the camera until my throat gave out. Instead, I said, I can build you a clean overlay. Not a rewrite, just a supplemental layer that reads raw input from your system and reroutes it through a cleaner algorithm. No conflict, no migration risk. He leaned in, telling me you can fix it without touching Nexceller's backend. I'm telling you I built Nexceller's backend. Silence. Then, send a draft by Monday. We'll cut you a PO. By Tuesday, Beacon Analytics had its first six-figure contract. I didn't gloat. I didn't change my LinkedIn status. I didn't update my job title. I just worked. While Troy paraded around industry panels claiming AI-fueled forecasting innovation, I sat in a tiny co-working cubicle in Dayton with bad coffee and a prepaid Wi-Fi hotspot, correcting the projections his team had mangled. My model reduced route errors by 63% in the first 3 weeks. Vendors stopped threatening lawsuits. Distribution costs dropped. Kay and DTK's COO sent me a fruit basket. Meanwhile, back at Nexceller, the board was reportedly concerned about product inconsistency. Confusion was spreading like mold. How was Troy's forecast engine underdelivering if it was built by a genius? And who was this no-name boutique firm suddenly scooping up accuracy awards from the same clients Nexceller used to tout in their press deck? Whispers started. I know because Serena forwarded me the internal Slack thread. VP Sales. Anyone heard of Beacon Analytics? They just saved K and DTK's Q3. Product lead? I think they're using a hybrid version of our architecture. How is that even legal? Good question. Enter Troy's panic email. To me. The subject line was classic. Concerning your current engagements, he didn't even bother with a greeting. Jennifer, we are aware of your activities under Beacon Analytics and believe them to be in violation of the terms set forth in your previously signed non-compete agreement. Cease all activity immediately or face legal escalation. Regards, Troy Renshaw, VP Innovation, Nexceller Systems. I read it 5 times and actually laughed. Because the non-compete he was threatening me with, the one attached to a termination letter citing strategic restructuring with no cause, the one drafted after January 1st? Yeah, that one. I forwarded the email to Welly. Sarah wrote back 10 minutes later, perfect. Let him file. He's walking straight into the statute. I replied to Troy with exactly 2 words, looking forward, and then I went back to work. No fireworks, no loud declarations, just line after line of code, every one a quiet little hammer chipping away at his glass castle. Troy thought this was a sprint, but I was building a siege, slow, legal, inevitable. The kind of vengeance that shows up in a suit, smiles at the receptionist, and leaves with your entire empire in a tote bag. Cease and desist came by courier. Man in a rumpled blazer, probably paid hourly and dead behind the eyes, handed me the envelope like he was delivering a pizza he knew no one ordered. Heavy ivory stock. Nexceller's logo stamped in metallic blue like it meant something. Inside, 4 pages of huff and puff, legalese wrapped in corporate tantrum. A masterpiece of fear disguised as confidence. We're demanding immediate cessation of services that directly compete with Nexceller's intellectual property. They cited my alleged violation of Clause 7.2c of the non-compete. They even bolded that part, like a judge was going to be swayed by aggressive formatting. I didn't flinch. I just scanned the pages, texted Sarah Patel at Welly a photo, and wrote, "It begins." She replied with a fire emoji and a court link. That same week, filed the countersuit. Not a reply, not a rebuttal, an opening salvo. We invoke Statute SB 83B, Section G, Paragraph 4. Non-compete agreements contingent upon continued employment without just cause are null and void if applied post-January 1. I wasn't just defending myself. I was going for the throat. And the timing? Chef's kiss. Because Nexceller's Q3 strategy meeting was that Friday. And Welly had a little surprise planned. Precisely 10:11 a.m., as Troy was mid-sentence on a North Star Vision Matrix slide. Whatever that means, his assistant stepped in and handed him a thick envelope. He paused, blinked, peeled it open in front of the entire executive team. Inside, our complaint, the lawsuit, exhibits A through G. Every file, timestamp, and affidavit, neatly tabbed. Our attorney's name stamped on the cover like a warning label. Witnesses said Troy's face drained of color, so fast someone offered him water. "This is a joke," he snapped. "She's violating her non-compete." That's when Nexceller's in-house counsel leaned forward, slow and quiet, and asked, "Is that the same agreement executed after her termination meeting?" Troy bristled. "She was never terminated. She left." Actually, legal replied, flipping through their own file, her letter states internal realignment and structural synergy, which doesn't constitute cause. "Doesn't matter," he said. "She's using our engine." Another flip of a page. "She has the original file directories. Codebases dated 6 months before your employment, all backed up, all time-stamped." He tried to speak. Didn't. Instead, he stared at the file like it might explode in his hands. Outside that room, I kept working. I didn't post, didn't tweet, didn't so much as change my email signature. But I could feel the shift. Serena texted me a screenshot of Troy's calendar, cleared from noon to 5 p.m. the rest of the week. Another exec quietly updated their LinkedIn to open to work. The email chain leaked, first to the product team, then to sales, then everywhere. Nexceller had fired the architect of its core engine, tried to bury her under a bogus clause, then got outperformed by her ghost, and now she was suing them with receipts. The whispers turned to chatter. Investors called for clarification. Troy issued a rushed "we do not comment on ongoing litigation" statement and looked like a deer blinking through a windshield. Meanwhile, discovery began. Welly sent subpoenas for Slack archives, email logs, JIRA tickets, and deployment notes. We cross-referenced commit histories, screenshot every mention, even pulled a project milestone calendar with my initials next to 92% of the deliverables. The crown jewel. Black message from Troy, dated 2 months before my termination. "We need to push Jennifer out before her vesting hits. She's too embedded. Take her name off the roadmap." That went straight into the folder labeled malice. When Welly showed me that screenshot, I didn't say a word. I just clicked save, sipped my coffee, and stared at the blinking cursor on the summons draft. It was ready. It was time. The court date was set. The summons printed. The documents served. And Troy had no idea what was coming next. Because now, this wasn't personal. This was precedent. Troy waltzed into the courtroom like he was headlining a TEDx talk for narcissists. Navy suit, new haircut, that same tight smirk he wore the day he told me to sign it or you're out. He looked like someone who believed in his own press, arms crossed, flanked by a trio of Nexceller attorneys with matching briefcases and expressions that screamed we bill by the hour, not by the win. I didn't look at him, didn't need to. I sat at our table in a fitted gray suit I'd bought secondhand, hair pulled back, no makeup, no jewelry. I didn't come to perform. I came to end things. I said nothing. Sarah Patel, bless her caffeinated soul, did the talking. Welly had brought in their lead counsel for the hearing, but Sarah still sat beside me, scribbling notes in the margin of a yellow legal pad that read "Watch him crack" across the top. The judge, a tired woman in her 60s with librarian glasses and zero patience for performative nonsense, asked for opening remarks. Troy's lawyer went first, waxed poetic about corporate integrity, intellectual property rights, and how I was in flagrant violation of a signed agreement. The usual scarecrow routine. Then our turn. Sarah stood, tucked her hair behind one ear, and said simply, "This is not a case about theft. It's a case about erasure." She handed the judge Exhibit A, a printed file directory, neatly bound and time-stamped. The judge flipped through it. Page after page, source code files, Git commit logs, original architecture schematics, all authored, labeled, or commented on by Jennifer Ross. Every single one predating Troy's first day at Nexceller by at least 3 months. When the judge asked for clarification, Sarah tapped a section with her pen. These models formed the foundational layer of the Nexceller forecasting engine. As evidenced, they were created, tested, and deployed under Miss Ross's leadership well before Mr. Renshaw's employment. The judge looked up. "Is this true, Mr. Renshaw?" Troy blinked. Well, he stammered, yes, she wrote some of the early prototypes, but the final engine was a joint effort, executed under my direction. "And when did you begin directing her work?" Sarah asked, sweet as a poisoned cupcake. Troy paused. Well, technically I was promoted after her exit, so you never managed her. No, you never supervised her during development. No, yet you claim full authorship. He shifted in his chair. The final product was mine. I refined it. Refined, Sarah repeated. Meaning you added features. I provided strategic vision. The judge raised a brow. And Miss Ross, Sarah continued, who built the initial regression models, tested cross-sector variances, deployed the machine learning layer. Objection, Troy's lawyer cut in, calls for speculation. Withdrawn, Sarah said, then we'll let the code speak for itself. And she handed over Exhibit B, screenshots of commit logs with my name, timestamps, and linked pull requests. One even had a comment from Troy. While this is fire, the judge didn't smile. But I could see it in her eyes. The tide had shifted. Sarah sat down, calm, precise. Troy leaned toward his lawyer, whispering something frantic. The attorney's jaw clenched. Papers were shuffled. Then the judge said, "I'd like to take a short recess before we continue. I'll need time to review the employment contract and this directory." She tapped the folder once, like it had already made up her mind. Troy stood and turned to glare at me as if sheer arrogance could undo what we'd just shown. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I just looked back at him the way a hunter watches a trapped animal thrash against its own panic. Because I knew what came next. One clause, one sentence, buried in a statute he never bothered to read. And when the judge returned, she'd read it aloud, word for word. And when she did, that smirk on Troy's face, it wouldn't survive the breath that followed. The courtroom reassembled with the kind of brittle, quiet, usually reserved for church pews and funerals. Troy had stopped adjusting his cufflinks. His posture had deflated just enough to betray the storm brewing under his skin. His lawyer, suddenly pale and very, very alert, sat stiff beside him, pen poised but untouched. Judge Kellerman returned to the bench carrying a single sheet of paper. Her glasses were lower on her nose than before. She didn't sit. She just cleared her throat and began reading. Per statute 83B.16, subsection G, she said, voice even, any non-compete executed as a condition of continued employment after January 1st shall be deemed non-enforceable if attached to a retaliatory termination without cause. Click. That was the sound of Troy's lawyer's pen hitting the table. Audible. He leaned toward Troy and hissed, "We are so screwed." The silence that followed was surgical. The kind of silence that slices open the moment and lets truth spill out. Judge Kellerman placed the page down, looked directly at Troy, not at his lawyer, not at legal, not even at me. "Mr. Renshaw," she said, "you and your counsel submitted no evidence of cause, no documentation, no performance warnings, no disciplinary action against Miss Ross prior to her dismissal." Troy opened his mouth. She raised a hand. "Don't speak." He didn't. The judge turned to our table. "Miss Ross, your counsel has motioned for compensatory damages and of intellectual property attribution and injunctive relief against further use of the contested model under Nexceller branding." Sarah stood. "That's correct, Your Honor. We are also requesting costs, prejudgment interest, and a public correction on all corporate filings referencing authorship." The room didn't breathe. Judge Kellerman gave a single, deliberate nod. "We'll begin proceedings for damages this afternoon." Then, almost as an afterthought, "And let the record show, this court finds the non-compete unenforceable under state statute. Miss Ross's countersuit will proceed." Boom, no explosion, just the gavel. But it felt like a bomb had gone off in the room. The kind that doesn't shatter glass, but strips every mask from every face. Nexceller's general counsel turned slowly, leaned into Troy's ear, and said loud enough for the court reporter to catch it, "Why didn't you settle?" Troy didn't answer. He couldn't, because he'd insisted on pushing this. He was the one who filed the cease and desist. He was the one who took credit for something he didn't build. And now his name was going to be permanently etched into legal databases under the keyword retraction. I sat still, back straight, hands folded, no emotion on my face. But inside I was lava, not rage, not triumph. Just the slow, burning certainty that justice was no longer abstract. It was operational. It had teeth, and they had just sunk in. Sarah leaned toward me and whispered, "We've got momentum now." I nodded once. The judge called a 10-minute recess. As people filed out, Troy stayed seated, staring at the spot where the judge had stood like it might suck him into the floor. And then he looked at me. Finally, no smirk, no condescension, just raw, unfiltered dread. He had climbed the ladder on my shoulders, and now he was falling, rung by rung, through a trapdoor he installed. I didn't look away, because I wasn't gloating. I was documenting, and the next page would be the reckoning. The verdict came on a Wednesday. Gray skies, rain that didn't fall so much as hover in the air like a threat. The kind of weather that makes you feel like something's waiting to end. Judge Kellerman read the decision without flair or apology, her voice flat and surgical. Exceller Systems is hereby ordered to pay $2.4 million in compensatory damages to Miss Jennifer Ross, inclusive of interest and legal fees. The court further grants a permanent injunction against the continued representation of the disputed forecasting engine as an internally developed asset. Intellectual authorship rights shall be publicly attributed to Ms. Ross across all relevant filings, product documentation, and marketing collateral, retroactively and henceforth. The transcript will say I nodded. What it won't show is the quiet rupture in my chest, the sound of something old and calcified, bitterness, grief, humiliation, finally cracking and spilling into the drain. It was over. Not revenge, correction. Truth sharpened and served in a courtroom, with consequences wrapped in legalese. Troy wasn't present for the judgment. He'd left during closing arguments, uttering something about needing to prepare for appeal. But the appeal never came. Instead, 6 days later, an internal HR memo from Nexceller leaked to the press. Subject: personnel update effective immediately. Troy Renshaw has been terminated for cause. We wish him the best in his future endeavors. His LinkedIn vanished. Scrubbed. Erased like a misstep in a resume no one would ever verify again. Industry blogs speculated. No one wanted to say it out loud. You don't get terminated for cause unless someone shows the receipts. I had all of them. I didn't respond to the press inquiries, didn't give interviews. I wasn't interested in vindication by social media. I wanted space. That Friday, as I was finalizing a small onboarding contract for a logistics firm in Portland, an email came in from a cloaked domain. Subject: Jennifer. Upcoming board transition opportunity, no signature. Just a line: we've been following your case. Your clarity under pressure was instructive. We'd like to speak about a potential board seat. Confidentially, for now. I didn't reply, didn't mark it unread, didn't even smile. I just let the cursor hover for a moment. Then I moved the message to a new folder. Next. Stood up. Poured black coffee into a chipped ceramic mug from the Beacon Analytics kitchen. Walked to the window. Outside, the city was alive with horns and wet pavement, and people trying to outrun whatever version of failure they were currently failing at. And I was calm. Done, not healed, because that implies you go back to something. No, I wasn't returning. I had changed. And Nexceller, they were still trying to figure out how their miracle engine became their liability. Their investors wanted explanations. Their clients were pivoting. The name Jennifer Ross was now etched into more than just lawsuit databases. It was on patents, in procurement reports, in the footnotes of every presentation slide that used to bear Troy's lies. I took one last breath, opened my inbox, scrolled to the bottom of my archived threads, found the last email from Troy, the one with the subject line, concerning your current engagements. I deleted it, clicked empty trash, then shut the laptop. Some bridges you cross, some bridges you watch burn. But some, you salt the damn ground where they stood, so nothing that arrogant ever grows back again.